These are a couple messages from our pals. I don't know how they keep getting in here, but this guy Dave Groan keeps coming in, plays in Nirvanga, gets pretty pissed when our drummer Dan leaves his drums around. So that's then this dude Kirk Complain generally comes in here too, also pissed about gear borrowing. So I don't know who gave him a key, but we're gonna look into it and get him out of here as soon as possible. I'm Mike, I play in Fight Amputation, and this is our practice space. We share this spot with a couple bands, also Philly noise rock bands here in Philadelphia. Over here is our friend Guitarist, and over here is our friend Bubonic Bear. It's kind of a massive room full of drum sets and gear and amps and cabinets and guitars and everything else. Most of which is really awesome shit, so figured that'd be worth pointing out. I guess I'll start with the oldest piece that I use here, I guess, which would be this cabinet and this head. I guess currently I'm using the Acoustic 450 through the 215, and I have the PV Classic 100 through the Marshall 412. It's kind of been a long evolution to get to this point, and mixing solid state and tube. For a long time I was all tube, and I experimented with all solid state too, and kind of landed on this combo. But this has been in my rig. This is my current rig, the two cabs, two heads. This particular half has been in the rig for like... It
had to be at least like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer, right?
Yeah, I bought it from a friend, our friend Big Kev, who helps us run Knife Hits, which is our label. We've done a couple like homegrown releases on it, and we have our new CD out. It's kind of Frankenstein a little bit. It obviously doesn't have the original Ampeg 15s in there. It's two 100-watt EVs, which honestly, I couldn't have done anything better with this cab myself. The way this sounds, it just has this mid-range and attack that I've never really been able to match it. It's kind of a pain lugging this thing around. It's one of the biggest cabs, aside from one of our bass cabs that we ever had to carry, but I've tried to replace it out of convenience, and I've just never been able to, because it just does something to my tone that I love. Yeah, so I'm running just the 200-watt Acoustic Model 450 through it. It's one of the original 80s acoustics. The ones they make now clearly are not the same amps. These are really similar to the Suns, which I also own a beta lead, but this has done something for me that hasn't been able to. Just wanted to point out, you know, this was Frankenstein from in the past. I'm not actually sure who did it, but I actually like what they did. They ran, if you look here, generally this is always the power on switch, and it's just a terrible design really, because it's just this little plastic button and it's shorted out. I mean, you know, that's it. So whoever Frankensteined it basically rewired it so this still lights up, but the power switch is down here, and it's just a much better design now. You know, as you can see, this still has the EQ sliders, and I make heavy use of these. Obviously in the studio I change them around, but these are basically my live settings because, I don't know, again, like this, I look for attack and mids out of this amp, particularly here, and as you can see by that, that's what I do. And I always remember when we toured with Weed Eater, when Dixie Dave saw this, he always commented about how, you know, the way to set these things is to put a frown on them and not a smile. So I always think of that now when I see this. It's all about the frown on the EQ. Yeah, and one other thing is all these amps generally have been retubed, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but you know, basically retubed and had a lot. Obviously, this is a 1980 Music Man HD150, and our friend Nick Palatucci at Bearded Guitar Repair, who does all of our repairs, he basically got this thing up to shape. You know, I bought it with, I mean, this had the original tubes in it and everything. It's a 1980, a lot of corroded parts and everything. So the Music Man sounds good now. It's not in my current rig, but I plan to work it back in at some point, and, you know, at least in the studio. This has actually been a workhorse. I've never had to have it worked on. This is, I'm not sure the year, I believe it's a mid-80s acoustic Model 450. So then, yeah, I match it with the Marshall 412 and the PV Classic 100. I don't actually know the date on this, and I haven't had it serviced yet. I've only owned it about a year, so it just kind of came with the tubes I liked and everything. I bought it for dirt cheap, so I've kind of kept it that way. It's actually kind of new to my rig. For a while I was using, it's out of commission right now, it still works, but our buddy Phil Shorn, who used to play in Mid-Iron Blast Shaft and Gonna Bomb, and currently plays in Faking, a pretty rad Philly noise rock band on Reptilian. He built cabs, it's called a Keystone, and it's a 212 just with some Celestians in there. And I used that for a while, paired with this, if you can kind of sneak in there. I know it's buried in our decaying pile of shit, but this is just a 115. I bought Frankenstein. It's an old PA mount, and kind of similar to this, and it's ported at the bottom. It's a 115 Eminence that this Sun Beta lead was in. So for a while I was using the Sun Beta lead through the 115 and this Music Man HD 150 through the 212 paired with this. So I was using 3 amps. I tried to scale back, and I could never really, find 2 that worked until the studio we record at, Gradwell, always had one of these PBs, and I've used it on almost all of our records, at least the ones recorded at Gradwell. And I always said I wanted to buy one, and I finally found one. And it has been, knock on wood, a workhorse ever since, and it really gives me a well-rounded, kind of fat, warm tone when compared to the Acoustic. So together they kind of give this like natural delay, solid state match with tube. Yeah, and that's really it as far as the amps. And always kind of gone bare bones, and I just run just the stock Gibson SG Standard. I experimented with a few different pickups, but I went right back to the stock ones because, I don't know, maybe I have bad taste, but I also just kind of think that shitty sound that they give really works for what we do as a band. And then I'm really bare bones with the pedals down here. Really the tone all comes from the Rat, and I boost it with the MXR micro amp, and that's really it. I use the ABC Morley because for a while I was doing I was running 3 amps, like I said, so I kind of kept that in there because it's never given me a problem. And I've run through a couple of Morley ABYs, which have they just tend to short out, and for some reason this ABC has always stayed right there, even though I'm only using 2 amps now. It's, a little contact cleaner, and it's never failed me. So aside from that, yeah, I mean, for a while I was just running the Rat, but again, because of how compressed it is, I started throwing the micro amp to boost it in front of it, and I kind of got that idea from Unwound, who, when they did like some of the reunion shows, that's kind of an updated version of what they used to use back in the 90s. So that micro amp's a really good boost pedal. And then I just use the analog delay, the old Joyo. It's just a cheap rip-off, and as far as delay goes, that's actually not an analog delay. It's just supposed to sound like one. I've always preferred shitty delay pedals rather than nice fancy ones, because the delay I like to use is I just want it to be as like shitty sounding as possible. I don't really know how else to describe it, but simple and bare bones. Kind of what I've always gone for with my guitar tone. I kind of put more into the amps and the cabs than the pedals and the pickups. And yeah, I think as far as my rig, that's about it. I kind of go for a sludgy punk tone. Over the years of swapping amps out of this particular rig and just experimenting, like, this is what I've landed on. I've been using this for about 2 years. It's really done me well. I honestly haven't been able to find much else that could do me right, even if it's by the book or, spending a lot of money. Like, this is kind of the worn, shitty amps that I end up sticking with. So that's about it for the guitar stuff.